Hey everyone, it's Joe Carrell here today on behalf of the Solid State Logic. Very excited to be with you guys today. What we're doing is I've taken a song that I recorded a few years ago. I co-produced with a band called Them Dirty Roses. Great friends of mine. They're just a terrific rock band. Not modern rock, not alternate rock, just I call it 3 chords and a cloud of dust rock and roll. They're going to plug their Les Pauls into Marshalls and rock your face off for a couple hours in the club. That type of a rock band. And we recorded an album, EP, a couple years ago. And I thought it'd be fun to announce a new product that we have coming out. And I'm getting ready to show you using this song, because this is the kind of song that I think of when I think of this product. So looking at the screen, what we have is what you already know, right? We have the Channel Strip 2, which is an SSL 9000, basically full range audio, clean, high headroom, really snappy channel strip compressor, just an amazing console. And then we go back to the origin of the company and the original 4KB console, which had the channel strip compressor, was actually a precursor to the bus compressor that we know now. And it had a colorful VCA section that imparted a character to the sound, which is replicated here. It had an EQ that was kind of a precursor to the what became later, the brown knob, but this was a little more, I would call it fuzzy. It has a vibe. It's a very cool vibe. But also that was a transformer-based console. So we have a mic pre section here that models that transformer input. Great tool. So what am I here to announce today as the newest addition to the SSL Complete bundle? I'm excited about this, guys. Bam, right here. Look at that. Let's just close these so we can just revel in it. The 4K-E. When I think of SSL and when I think of rock and roll, it's the 4K. And then that's what comes to my mind. I'm sure if you're watching this, that's what comes to your mind too. And not just rock and roll, but there's just something about the mid-range punch and aggression of an SSL that just kind of jumps out of the speakers and smacks you in the mouth. I mean, that became the standard of rock and roll because it was punchy, just had attitude. So let's talk just real briefly about a couple of its features. We have the EQ section here, which we have the original brown knob. We have the black knob, which most would say that's the one that all others are to be judged by. And then we have later in the G series, we had the orange knob. It had different type curves, but more importantly than the curves, it had a different type of vibe overall because it was based on a passive design like a Pultec. It wasn't passive, but it was kind of based on that design. And it's got a great top end. It's a really fun circuit to play with as an option to these other two. Okay. Also, we have the mic pre for a 4000 hat. It was colorful. It was flavorful. So we can engage that and get some of that aggression and distortion. We have the VCA fader section. Again, why is it cool that we have this fader? This isn't just a fader. It's not just a trim or a boost. It's imparting that VCA color. Okay, so we can boost this up and get more coloration, and then trim it down here, which I've done quite a bit on this mix. And then we have the original channel strip compressor, which is very similar to what we know now, even on the late dualities. But we also have, of course, the gate and expander. All that's very usable, just like SSL is known for. All the routing is crazy versatile. So we can put the filters and the EQ. We can put things in, like right here, put the filters before the EQ, dynamics before or after EQ, that kind of a thing. So let's get to today's song, because we're going to talk about a couple different things. We're going to again, this is just an in-your-face rock band, and we're gonna talk about vocals, how we got the vocal sound using the 4K thing. We're gonna talk about drums. We're gonna talk about electric guitars and effects. We're gonna talk about all kinds of fun things. All right, so let's listen to this track. All right.
Might bring up the past, or is that something that you hide? Well, not tonight. I'll start running, keep on running.
That's long enough to give you the idea. Man, I love this band. I just can't get enough of that style of music. Just that's what gets my blood gets my blood pumping. All right, so what I did is I pulled up the mix that I had originally done maybe 3 years ago. It's been a minute, and wiped all of it. Wiped all the automation, all the plug-in inserts, all the hardware inserts, because had used quite a bit of hardware originally, and used nothing but the SSL Complete. So we have the 4K-E, the Channel Strip 2, the 4K-B, Blitzer, FlexVert. We have nothing but SSL. So everything you hear is going to be available within the complete bundle. Let's take a minute to talk about 360, because it's more than just what's going on behind the scenes of the control surfaces. It is that as well, of course. You click on the little home here, and you can see what units you have. You can download the firmware if it needs updates. You can download the software for 360 when you need updates. You can calibrate the meter on your UC1, all of that kind of thing. But where you're going to spend most of your time is this screen right here. And that's your virtual mixer, which looks amazingly like a real SSL, which I love. You have the light gray here, which is the Channel Strip 2. Anytime you see that, that's the plugin you have inserted on that channel strip. You see this medium gray, darker gray here, that's the 4K-E, and the dark black is the 4K-B. And you can really customize this screen however you want to. Up the top, we have our order of events on our channel strips, whether we want the filters to be first, EQ, post, compression or pre-compression, that kind of a thing. A lot of times I just hide that so I gain more real estate. Now, the next thing here, we see our input section, so we can drive our preamps that's built into the 4K-B and the 4K-E, and then gain right here on the channel strip 2, just into the plug-in kind of thing. But a lot of times, again, I hide that as well, and that way I just pretty much have the dynamic section and the EQ section, which is really what I'm wanting to see. And you'll see when I push play, we have on the input section, we have our kind of like the 4K-E had plasma meters, the orange plasma. Watch this. I love that. I just absolutely love that. But you can even see down here, if we have the black knob, the brown knob, or the orange knob in the 4K, it's represented. And below that, we have our faders. And remember, these aren't just faders as in like our Pro Tools fader. So which when we just use the little shortcut here, we can flip back and forth from the Pro Tools screen to the 360 and just go back and forth and use them simultaneously. But when we push this fader, we're pushing the virtual VCA section of the console. So we're getting a sound, not just digital volume. We're actually getting that sound of the VCAs being driven into, which, let's face it, that's part of the sound of those records we love so much, that a lot of rock records that the 4K-E was used to mix, that's part of the sound. And we can do that right here using the UF8s, or within the plugin themselves, or within the 360. So we have a lot of options on flipping back and forth between Pro Tools and the 360 and getting where we want to be. Okay, up here on the right, we have our meter plugin. And you can change this to any of the aspects of the metering plugin that you want. I just happen to really like VU meters, so I like to see that just right in front of my face all the time and know how hard I'm hitting the stereo bus. And below that, we have our bus compressor section. And in this set mix, I was actually only using the one, but I just inserted an extra one on one of my electric guitar tracks, just so you can see here that it'll populate this area, and you can choose which plugin you want to change or monitor larger right here. So it's a very, very cool thing used in combination with our DAW of choice to get a more authentic SSL feel beyond our DAW. And then also I mixed using this beautiful control surface that you see in front of me. I've got, in my room, I have two UF8s, so I can get hands on left and right. I have the UC1 because I'm just to be real honest, I'm very much over the mouse. I'm just done with it. I want to use it as little as possible. So now I have these three awesome channel strips that I can use very heavily across a mix. Some mixes, nothing but those three, or a combination of any one or two of them. And I can EQ my high pass, low pass filter. I can compress, expand gate right here with hands on. Plus my bus compressor shows up right here, which has a real VU meter, a spring VU meter, which is very cool. And then also, as part of the complete bundle, there's a meter plug-in. So I have the UF1 right here. And what that allows me to do is have VU meters right here in front of my face at all times, so I can see it's on my stereo bus. So I can see how hard I'm hitting the stereo bus, just as if I was mixing on an analog console, because that's still important to me, because some days I patch in hardware on the stereo bus and things like that. So I need to be in the sweet spot for analog, even when I'm completely in a box, if that makes sense. So let's just talk about a couple things here. Let's talk, first of all, let me put on my glasses so I can see what I'm doing here. Let's switch over to the lead vocals, and let's just focus on those first, because James is an incredible rock singer. He's got a great voice, and let me solo him up after treatment, and I'll kind of show you what I've done to get the sound, okay?
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of, is that something that you hide? Well, not tonight.
Okay, so you're hearing EQ, compression, you're hearing reverbs, you're hearing delays, you're hearing kind of a pitch shift spreading kind of thing. So let's just bypass all of that. Go back to where we started, and even the parallel compression. And let's just play his voice. It's probably going to be a little quiet, but that's okay.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring...
Okay, one thing I want to talk about real quick is that I use a multi-bus method. This comes from years ago studying Michael Brower, kind of just really loving some of the mixes he was turning out and wanting to copy that kind of idea. So even though I'm not using compression on anything today except the drum bus, I'm still, as you see, I have a vocal return, a drum and bass, and a guitar bus. And they have saturation on them. And I can change saturation from bus to bus before I hit my final stereo master, which is, again, all SSL. We have the Fusion, the Vintage Drive. We have Violet EQ. There's something about just the SSL Buss compressor on songs like this. They've got a new 3-band option, which I did use throughout this section, but this thing just slaps. I mean, it just does. A little stereo widening, and then that meter that I was telling you guys about. Okay. All right, for our first plugin on the lead vocal, I'm using multiband compression, and that's normal for me. That's typical. And think of this as the SSL traditional bus compressor that we all know and love, but split into 3 different bands. So it's very effective at taking a vocal or any other instrument and kind of making the tone more consistent, so we can have a more consistent bed for all our processing to happen later. All right. So, and it's also great on stereo bus. I use this a lot of times on pop and things like that, where I don't want to compress the top end very much and the low end very much. Just kind of focus it on the mid range. This is a fantastic stereo bus tool in addition. But on this song, I was preferring the traditional compressor. Anyway, that said, on the vocal, James, as you will hear, has this resonant punch in the kind of the nasally thing in the mid range, and the words of this song are kind of punchy and fast paced. So most of my compression is centered in between 1K and 10K, approximately. Looks like 950 and 9.6, which probably just because I let go of the button a little inaccurately. But let me play it for you and you'll see.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring...
So here, the 10K and above, I'm barely tickling it with a fast attack, fast release. So it's just some of that spitty stuff that's kind of getting rid of maybe a little super high sibilance. And the low, everything below 1K is much less compressed. But one cool thing about this multiband compressor is that this section right here. So what I'm going to do, see these little headphone emblems right here? We can kind of click on those and solo on just that one band, and you'll hear this is that everything between 1K and 9.5K, which is where all the kind of the liveliness of this track is. And what we can do, we can engage this button right here and add the 4000 saturation. So as we know, 4000K consoles had a as you pushed into it, it had a real pleasing breakup saturation kind of thing. And we can put that in any one of these bands to any degree that we want to. So let me show you.
Now you've been warned. I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might.
So again, this is rock, man. This is rock. We want these vocals to slap you. So I had that down to around 6, I think, but I'm definitely using it. I'm using it on the low end as well, but not the top end. I'm not trying to saturate any of that spitty kind of stuff. So it's a really cool feature, I think, that's built into the G3. So I follow that up with my traditional EQ now that I have a more consistent bed to start building on. Okay, so the 4K here, what we've got going on is a handful of things. I got some EQ. I'm adding a little top end. I'm adding a little bit of that 2K 1.5 thing just because it's mean sounding. It just sounds aggressive. Cutting out just a little bit of low mids and then fast attack compression. And this is rock, right? I don't want his vocal to, I want it to be kind of contained. Let's take a before and after listen.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of, is that something that you...
I've trimmed back the volume some. I'm trying to make sure that you're not getting a lot more volume just so you can kind of hear before and after. It's more punchy. It's more aggressive. It's contained, but at the same time, it's got more energy too, because all the subtleties of all the softer words are staying up in our face. And that's the sound of modern rock to me.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I...
Okay, very cool. Love that. So again, I'm adding some more distortion. So I'm getting a little bit more of that 4K fuzz, we'll call it a little messy, nasty, as we go in each step because it fits the genre of this music. Okay, so to get rid of a little bit of the spitty stuff that's left over, I'm using the Fusion high-frequency compressor. And I'll show you kind of what I'm focusing in on by hitting this listen button here.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up...
So that's some of that energy in that, 6K up is going to start getting compressed within the tracks. So what I'm going to do, I'll bypass it and play you before and after. It'll be subtle, but it'll be audible.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of, is that some...
Okay, so some of the more shiny elements, which we don't want in this type of a song. There's plenty of music, plenty of pop music where we want that, and we just simply wouldn't use that tool. But this is an effective tool in this kind of music to get rid of a little of that extra shiny stuff that you just really don't want. Okay, we're going to follow that up with the Dser. And I got to tell you, ever since I got the complete SSL bundle, this has been one of my favorite tools in it. It probably doesn't get talked about enough. So between about 5 and 10K, probably, it looks like 4.7 and 10K, knocking back some sibilance.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of, is that something that you have... Now you've been...
So when I hit the headphone button there, you could hear what I was knocking back. If this sounds aggressive, it's because I'm going to add some parallel compression later that brings sibilant. The more compression you add, the more sibilance is brought up, right? And so a lot of times our de-essers are doing quite a bit of work in heavily compressed forms of music. Okay, next we have the transformer, and that's just for a little bit of roundness. You'll see I have the shine turned all the way down. I'm just trying to add a little more weight to his lead vocal and a little rounding effect. If you want to, you can use this on a kick drum and hit the low F extend and get a little more bottom end. You can get more shine if you want to, a little more of that sizzle that transformers are capable of adding a little air at times. But that's not what I'm looking for. So this is the setting I'm using today. Let me put it in bypass and then engage it. Now this is subtle. But especially when you hear it in the track, you can tell.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of, is that something that you hide? Well, not tonight.
It just sounds more impressive to me. It's subtle, but it's there. I've got one other thing just sitting there ready to be used, and I think I am using it on this song, is I have a limiter. Don't always use this on vocals, but sometimes in bangers, in rock, heavy rock, we just want to cap that vocal out. Say this is as loud as you're going to get, and that's kind of what I'm doing. And you'll see it's just cutting off a few little peaks here and there.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of his.
It's just that little extra last stage that puts the vocal where it belongs. Now, a lot of times in aggressive music, what I do is I use parallel compression as an add-on. So what I'll do is I have the vocal and I have it dry, and you'll hear where I've got the level, and I turn it up until it's almost loud enough, but not quite loud enough, and I route it on an aux to something like this. Kabam, Blitzer. And I want you to see, I've got it muted here, but I want you to see kind of how heavy-handed this parallel compression is, because I'm not being light, okay? It's polite is not, it doesn't have any part of this.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of.
Okay, so now let's unbypass this and bring it up until it feels like the vocal is where it belongs in the track.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of this at some.
So what we're doing, we're bringing up the level of the vocal in a more consistent way, because we're pulverizing this parallel compression track and bringing it up to where there's no transients left over. The sustain is being brought up by the fast release at 100 milliseconds. So what's left over basically is just a big old printed hot dog. I mean, you know, it is just chopped. Bam! It's just a straight line. So you bring that up underneath the more punchy real vocal, you know, we'll call it, and all of a sudden you've got this just more of the vocal in a way that is very consistent and sets in a track.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride.
Now let's turn on some of these effects we had going on and hear the finished product.
Now you've been warned, I've got a thorn stuck in my pride, and I just might bring up the past of this. That's something that you hide, well, not tonight.
All right, that is the vocal sound. Let's call it the new and improved SSL Complete vocal sound of Them Dirty Roses. You can't. Be sure and stream it. These guys are awesome. You're going to love all their music. But stay tuned, because what we're going to do is we're going to come right back and we're going to focus on drums. Let's hear what that 4K-E is capable of on a drum set.